All right. Well, you may have noticed that I'm not here in school today. That's because I'm going to be doing some things this semester that make it difficult to be there. So what we're going to do this semester is record videos, and we'll be having these videos during class time. Although I know the last time I made a video, a few of you kind of made a big deal that you'd have to stare at my face the whole time. So we're going to work this out so that we've got presentations every week or every class period, and we'll kind of go through things that we would normally be talking about in class. It won't be interactive, so you can't ask questions during the lecture, but you can pause it, write questions down, and at the end, email them to me. Or you can text me or call me, and we'll get to some more of that in a minute. But basically, it's going to be just like class. We'll still do grades the same way. We'll still have tests the same way. You'll take those during your class time, and we're just going to go through the semester like we would normally. One of the important things that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to make an effort to stay in contact. Because you can't ask questions in class, you need to make sure that you get those questions asked so that I can answer them. Sometimes if there's things that aren't clear, or especially leading up to a test, if you have questions about how things are interrelated, interconnected, you need to get those answered. So make sure and email me, or you can text me, or you can call me. You can call me anytime. Preferably don't call my house past 8 because the kids will be asleep, but you can call my cell phone, text, or email anytime. Another thing that's going to be important is that each day you send questions that you have about that lecture, because if you write questions down or you have them in your head and you think, oh, well, I'll remember them later, you tend not to remember those things. So make sure that every day after the lecture, you guys might have a little bit of time left in class. In fact, you will probably have some time left in class because this semester, that first period got extended. Use that time to have group discussions about the things that we cover, have some feedback from your classmates about maybe questions that you guys might share with one another. Maybe one of you knows the answer, and if not, just type an email up then and send any questions that you've got, and I can get them answered and hopefully back to you guys as soon as possible. Each week on Monday, you're going to be given a list of the things that we're going to be doing that week. Included in that list will be some questions for the week, and so throughout the various lectures you need to be paying attention to the information and finding the answers to that question or to those questions. You need to email the answers to those questions to me by noon on Saturday, so you'll have all day or all week hopefully to hear all the lectures, and then even in the extra time during the week, each of you can write out your answers, and then hopefully you'll have a chance to type them up and email them to me. I need to have them sometime by noon on Saturday. You can email them to me using your phone, a laptop, a computer, any way you can get them to me, get them to me. But those are going to be due every week by noon on Saturday. Additionally, instead of having the big essay paper or the big research paper like we did last semester, which I was very impressed to see the amount of work that you guys were able to do and the growth in those papers, because I won't be there to help work with you all through the process of writing a paper like we did last time. There's going to be some smaller essays throughout the semester that you'll have an opportunity to type up and send to me. They'll probably all be a page or 2 pages typed, again single-spaced, Times New Roman, 12-point font, and you'll send those to me periodically throughout the semester. There are probably 5, maybe 6 of those, and they're going to come a lot from the lectures and also from the reading that you're going to be doing in addition to the things that we'll be talking about in class. That's kind of a brief synopsis of how things are going to be running this semester. If there's anything that changes, we'll take care of it when the change needs to happen. And if you have any questions about how things are going to be going on, let me know. And we're just going to dive in and start looking at all the things we're going to be doing. The tests that you're going to be having, in case you're wondering how we're going to do the tests, they're not going to be online. They're going to be during your class period, and they'll be proctored by somebody. And so the tests will be sent to Mrs. Carey. She will have them for you on test day, and you'll have the class period to take the tests. The class period is a little bit longer, but the tests aren't going to be much longer. Just because the class is longer, I don't think your tests should be more difficult. I think they were already pretty challenging. I think they're where they need to be, and we've seen improvement through last semester, so hopefully we can keep that going. So we're going to begin going through the list of people that the state of Texas thinks you guys need to know about. And so one of the people on the list is Hammurabi. And we talked a little bit about him last semester, mostly about his code of laws and how those laws kind of fit into the overall evolution of legal theory or just laws in general throughout society and culture. But what we need to find out now is more about him as an individual. We kind of have this broad overview of history from last semester, and now we're going to be going through and looking at where different individuals get placed into this story and trying to see how these individuals work or interact within the environment surrounding them and how these individuals affect history. Because history isn't the story of stuff. It's not the story of events. It's really the story of people. And as people change or people begin to do things, that's what causes these events throughout history. It's people. One of the interesting things about people is that people don't change. We're still the same things that we've always been. We make the same mistakes. We have the same ideas. The principle that you see taught in the Bible, where the book of Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun, that's absolutely true. I mean, we're still doing all the same things that people were doing 5,000, 6,000 years ago. We just do it maybe in a little bit different way. We communicate the same ways. We still buy and sell things the same ways. The same motivating factors are still the impetus behind various events. People haven't changed. And so when we look through history, it's not only important to get an overall feel for the events, but it's very important to understand the people and see how individuals fit into the story of the world. And so Hammurabi. Well, the problem with some individuals is though they may have been involved in significant events, we don't always know very much about them. This is one of the stela, or these obelisks that from which we get most of the information that we know about Hammurabi. This is his law code. When you look at it, you can see on the right-hand side of this video that's the writing when you see it. And there are places when you see transcriptions of the code where there are just breaks in the text. That's because you have these cracks that run along the stela, and there's chunks missing of the rock, and so every once in a while we get to a place where we're not able to figure out what the words would have been. They're just missing from this rock. And it's kind of neat to see that Hammurabi had the foresight to create these rocks that last much longer than other things that he could have had them written on. And he would place these, we think, throughout his empire so that everybody could come and see what the laws were. One of the reasons why he's doing that is because his desire is to create a culture. He's uniting people in the ancient world. You have all these different city-states that are being united, and he's uniting them together into the first Babylonian Empire, what we call the first Babylonian Empire. And one of the things that you have to have an empire is you have to have a united people. If you want your empire to last for any span of time, the people who are being added to it need to be united in some way. What you're trying to do is you're trying to create a culture for the people. If you can create this culture where everybody feels like they're a part of the group, then you have an empire that will last past the founder. It'll last past that first person to go through and fight and unite everything together. For example, Alexander the Great, his empire, this massive Macedonian empire that spans the map when you look at the Middle Eastern and Mediterranean, and it just covered all of it. Well, as soon as he dies, it falls apart. And the reason why it falls apart is, one, because people are greedy, two, because he was kind of a smart aleck and wouldn't appoint an heir, and three, because he didn't create a culture that united all those people together. It's such a massive span of territory, it's impossible to create a unified culture in such a short period of time. And that kind of situation, the empire would need to be held together by force. And since he died and the force behind him kind of left when he did, it would fall apart. Hammurabi is going to have some of the similar problems. He's expanding his empire, it becomes one of the biggest empires in the region, and he will be unable, or his successors will be unable to keep it together. In fact, his son will be the only other king in this first Babylonian empire after him. There will be some people who rise up and cause rebellions when Hammurabi dies, and his son spends his entire time as king trying to put down these various rebellions. It just becomes a disaster because when Hammurabi dies, the power behind the empire, the maker of the law, goes with it. And so Nobody is willing to follow and nobody's willing to obey. They're going to break up and they're going to go back to the cultures that they had before they were united together by Hammurabi. You can see this with things like the Soviet Empire. You have the USSR linked all these countries in Eurasia and Asia together. And when the Soviet Empire, and even Eastern Europe, when the Soviet Empire collapses or lets these countries go back to governing themselves, there's all kinds of civil wars and fighting in these groups in these different countries, because the Soviet Union had kind of thrown people together and created districts or countries out of them, and they wanted to break back into the people groups that they were before they were all thrown together. And so that's going to happen, tends to happen when a power comes into a region and then leaves. You see this over and over and over throughout history. So if a power comes into a region and conquers a people group or overtakes a people group, the only way to achieve stability is for the power to remain long enough in order to create a new culture which melds the people together. You can see this in many of the places where imperial countries have come in, like in Rwanda in Africa, or Rhodesia in Africa, or it's Zimbabwe now. It used to be Rhodesia. The British Empire came in, kind of created order and started putting people groups into this territory, and when the British Empire leaves, the people groups have civil war. And so there's all kinds of problems or all kinds of issues when a power comes in and then leaves and creates this vacuum. It's going to happen with Hammurabi too. We don't know very much about his life. We have about 50 things that he wrote, 50 to 55 things that he wrote personally, letters from himself to other people. And basically, he spent all his time as king. We think, oh, wouldn't it be cool to be the king? You can do whatever you want. Turns out, not so much. It's actually a very time-consuming, very busy job. And Hammurabi spent all his time dealing with all kinds of things that are just pains and headaches to deal with. Not only did he have to worry about keeping all of these people united together, you can kind of see when he becomes king, this territory in the dark orange, right through, nope, go back. The territory in the dark orange is where Hammurabi had his empire when he began, and he's able to expand it to the light orange, all the way up to Mari. You can see down through Isin and Nippur and down towards the Arabian, down into the Arabian Peninsula. And so what's going to happen is he's going to spend all his time dealing with this expansive empire for the time. He's going to be dealing with floods along the Euphrates River, and we think, oh, a flood, it can't be that big of a deal. But it is, especially in the ancient world when they didn't have GPS mapping and when they didn't have appraisal districts to plot property lines. When a flood comes through and tears down all the fences, who figures out whose property is where? How do you go back and figure out where one farmer's property stops and where another farmer's property starts? And now these families who have been arguing over property boundaries for years, the property boundaries have been torn down, and now there's huge fights. There's going to be people killing one another in the streets over these property boundaries. The Egyptians would develop trigonometry, and that's kind of how they're able to deal with the flooding of the Nile every year. But here, this was very difficult. It's having to deal with all these floods. In addition to that, Babylon had like a communal herd, huge herds of beasts. And Hammurabi had to deal with that, finding people to shepherd them, finding people to herd them, finding people to care for them, making sure there's enough food, making sure there's all kinds of things that go, all the things that go along with keeping a herd of animals. Hammurabi is having to make sure that all these things are taken care of. And so what you're going to see is this man who winds up getting his empire, because he's a great military leader, is going to have to become not a great military leader, but a great planner. He's going to have to become somebody who deals well with all these different vicissitudes of life, all the changes that are going to be happening throughout the empire. He has to learn how to deal with these things, and he has to handle them adequately, or the empire will crumble from underneath him. His son, who comes after him, isn't able to do both of those things. And so the problem is here, you have a great man, Hammurabi, who's followed up by somebody who isn't like him and isn't able to master both of these different and various aspects of being a ruler in an empire like this, and it's going to crumble. And so Hammurabi has to deal with all these different things. Interestingly enough, many people think that Hammurabi is around the time of Abraham. It may be that one of the reasons why Abraham is leaving the region is because he's coming down during the time of the rise of the Babylonian Empire. Throughout time, various people have been assigned to Hammurabi from the Bible. Some people have said that Hammurabi is Nimrod. Some people have said that he's Amraphel. There's no evidence necessarily to link them together, but if Hammurabi is Amraphel from Genesis chapter 14 in the Bible, that makes him a contemporary of Abraham. And as far as the biblical account is concerned, they would be pretty close to around the same time anyway. You know, the late 1800s and early 1700s, late 1700s, they're going to be around the same time. And so it might very well be that as Abraham is leaving the region of Ur, Hammurabi is rising to power. And so it kind of puts this, in a historical context here when we're dealing with Abraham. Abraham is another biblical figure that another historical figure that we're going to be talking about, and he is very significant today in the world because two of the world's major religions, three if you count Judaism, two at least of the world's major religions are linked to him. And so most people in the world of faith are related in some way to Abraham. Abraham is going to be the father of two sons. He's going to have Ishmael with Hagar, and he'll have Isaac with Rebekah. Muslims today will chart their genealogies down through Ishmael. And many people today, mostly Hebrews, will chart their genealogy down through Isaac. And so these two different genealogies will bring about two very different religions, but they're all linked back to this man named Abraham. And so when we talk about Abraham as far as him being a biblical figure, the story of his life is very interesting. We don't know much about him before he is called to leave his home. But when he leaves, he's going to struggle with things the way that everybody will struggle with things. When Abraham is called to leave his home, along the way, it's actually his father Terah who is called to leave first. At least it appears that way from the account in Genesis. Along the way, his brother will die. And the family kind of pauses for a little while, and it's at that point when Abraham will be called to leave his family. It's difficult to leave your family and everything you know and everything you've been doing and everything you've ever done, so Abraham is going to struggle with this. And Abraham doesn't obey. He leaves, but he also takes Lot with him. Lot is his nephew, his brother's son, and so he takes Lot with him. And so they're going to go down toward the promised land, and there's going to be some issues that arise because Abraham didn't obey. And so Abraham and Lot are going to both become very wealthy, and they're going to split up. And Lot is going to go settle in the valley, where there's 5 cities in the valley, including Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham is going to take the other land up in the hills. Well, Abraham will be promised some things by God. And when we learn what the promises are that Abraham is given in the Bible, the rest of the Bible becomes focused on those promises. And so this is one of the key themes throughout Judaism and Christianity. And so when we talk about Abraham as a person, the promises that he's given from God become very significant in the history of the world. These 3 things that Abraham has promised will shape world history. They're going to affect everything that happens from his lifetime forward. And it's not because he's a perfect person. So we'll get to the 3 promises in just a second. But let's talk about Abraham for just a minute. He's already been disobedient to God because when he's called to leave his family, he doesn't. Additionally, as he's traveling in the land, he's going to have some issues with lying. He's going to come upon people and he's going to continually tell them that Sarah is his sister. Well, she is. She's his half-sister, but he's also married to her. And that marriage relationship supersedes or is more important than his relationship to her as a half-sister. And so when he comes to 2 different kings, he's going to come to one of the pharaohs and he's going to lie to the pharaoh and say, oh yeah, she's just my sister. And so Pharaoh is going to take her and make her his wife. It seems when you read through the account that maybe some things happened between her and the pharaoh, and God gets very upset and begins to punish Pharaoh, and he gets kind of upset with Abraham a little bit. And Pharaoh will come to Abraham and say, what have you done? Why did you lie to me and tell me that she was your sister when she's obviously your wife? And Abraham's excuse was, I was afraid. I was afraid that you would find out that she was she was my wife, and you would kill me because she's very attractive. And so Abraham deals with some of the same issues that we deal with today. We're all afraid of things. We're all scared that people are going to be mean to us or hurt us for doing something or for being something. And so he struggled with that. And so he tells this lie to Pharaoh. He's going to go over towards the promised land. He's going to run into a Philistine king, Abimelech, and he's going to do the same thing to Abimelech. He's going to say, oh, she's my sister. And Abimelech will take him. And Abimelech will actually have a vision from God. And God is going to tell him, don't touch the woman. She's Abraham's wife. And so then Abimelech will come and give Sarah back to Abraham. And Abraham will begin to learn to trust God. And as he goes up into the land, we talked about how he and Lot will split off. As he goes into the section of land that's for him, he's very concerned because he looks and all the good land seems to be taken and he seems to be left with not that much. And he will have a vision. God will come to him and reaffirm the promises that he's given to him. And the three basic promises that are given to Abraham is that he would have a child, and that child would become a nation, and that nation would go and inherit the land that Abraham was called to leave for, to leave his home in Ur and go down to this promised land. Interestingly enough, Ur is in the Chaldees, and the Chaldeans are the Babylonians. And so later, when Israel will be carried off into captivity, the Chaldeans will take them, and some of the Bible will actually be written in Chaldean. And so the Old Testament is not all in Hebrew. Part of the Old Testament is in Chaldean, this language that Abraham probably would have been speaking when he left the Chaldees to come down to this promised land. And so the Jews, the Hebrews, will be returned back to Abraham's home for a time when they're carried off into captivity. It's just an interesting note in history, and we'll get down more to that when we talk about people like Nebuchadnezzar and the third Babylonian Empire later. And so Abraham is going to have these three basic promises: that he'll have a son, that son will become a nation of people, and that nation of people will finally inherit what we call the Promised Land, or the Canaan region. The Romans called it Judea. And so these three basic promises are going to be filled throughout the story of Abraham's life. And part of the ways, or one of the reasons why Abraham will become famous, and not only because so many people trace their lineage back to him, but because of the examples that he leaves for people of how to faithfully serve God. God would call Abraham to do many difficult things, and Abraham wasn't always successful, but Abraham had faith, or he learned to have faith to trust in what God told him. And so one of the most difficult things, or most famous stories from Abraham's life, is Abraham Abraham is told Abraham is told to offer up his son Isaac as a sacrifice. And this was supposed to be one of the promises, right? I mean, he's given those three promises: the son who will become the nation, who will take the promised land, and now he's told to kill the son. That doesn't make sense. And so Abraham is confronted with this that doesn't make sense, and it doesn't stand to reason that God would promise a child to you and then take the child away, and none of the other promises could come true. And so Abraham has to reason with himself, how could God keep his word and still ask him to take his son's life? And so Abraham's reasoning was, well, the child must be raised from the dead. I will go up on the mountain and I'll offer the child, and then God will raise him from the dead, because that's the only way that the child could be sacrificed and that the other promises could still come true. And so Abraham reasons in his mind that God will raise Isaac from the dead. And it's interesting when you read through his account, when he's talking to his servants in the bottom of the mountain, and he and Isaac are going to go up the mountain to offer the boy. Abraham says, "You stay here, the boy and I will return shortly." And so Abraham fully expects Isaac to come down the mountain with him. And so he's not going up there to kill his son and leave him on the mountain. He's going up there to do what God says and bring his son back down. Now it turns out that what God was doing was refining Abraham, because Abraham has struggled with his faith throughout his life, trusting the Lord, understanding that the Lord knows what is best and that he will give him commandments for his good always. By the way, if you have a Bible with you, if you like to write in your Bible, you should underline a verse, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 24. The commandments of the Lord are for our good always. They're not for our bad, they're for our good. And Abraham had a hard time dealing with that. He struggled with the idea that what God was calling him to do, leaving his family, going to a new place, offering his son, were right. And so when he does this, he goes through this ordeal, it kind of refines his faith. It solidifies his trust in God, that God not only knows what he's doing, but God will provide for him in every way so that his word will come to be true. And this is the reason why Abraham is such a pivotal figure in the history of the world. Because people look to him as the father of the faithful, he is called sometimes, but as an example of what it's like to be a servant of God. At various points throughout time, Abraham has been held up as, in an unrealistic way as this pinnacle of faithfulness. Jesus would deal with that throughout the New Testament, people claiming, oh, we're the children of Abraham. And really, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're a Hebrew or you're not, because everybody who is faithful is a child of Abraham, because that was the significant thing about Abraham's life. And so as we look through history, and again, we're struggling or searching or seeking to find these individuals and how they fit into the story of the world, and how the things that happen to these individuals and the way that they react, what we can learn from them, and how we can kind of understand who we are and the things that we struggle with, and how we can learn to adapt and react to these situations that we face. The things that these people struggle with are very important. And their individual stories are what make up the story of the world. And so we're going to continue looking at people like Hammurabi and like Abraham and how they interact with one another and the people about them and what we can learn from them. And hopefully we'll get to see that history is more than just a list of dates and numbers and facts and figures, but it's trying to understand human nature through the events that happen to people, watching the way that people react to them and deal with them, and then learning how to act and react and deal with the very same situations that are going to appear in our lives today. Because that's one of the important things that we have to remember. People say that history repeats itself. History doesn't repeat itself. History the story just travels on in a straight line. There's no repetition. The time doesn't go backwards, so it doesn't repeat itself. What happens is you have similar events happening to people who are the same kinds of people that people have always been. And so if anything repeats itself, it's people repeat themselves. And our problem is we don't learn from those who came before us. We don't learn how to deal wisely. We don't learn how to deal correctly with the things that we will struggle with. And so if you are ever in a situation where you're trying to unite people together, you have to remember that what Hammurabi was struggling to do was to create a unified culture. That's why he codified their law. He wanted to create a unified culture in which all the people would come together and not see themselves as people from this city or people from this city or people from this city, but as a unified group of people united under that one law that brought everybody together. We struggle with this in our country today. People are trying to pull our country in different directions, in different factions, and different cultures. And as our nation gets pulled in these different directions, it doesn't unify the country. It tears it apart. And what we need to realize is that if we want the nation to be successful, we have to work towards creating a culture, an American culture. It doesn't mean we all have to be the same. It doesn't mean we all have to like the same things, dress the same way. But it does mean that if we are not seeking to become a people, united together even with our differences, then we're going to fall apart. Just like you see happening to Hammurabi's empire after he's gone. You remove that power, the people fall apart. It happens over and over and over throughout history where people fail to unite underneath a common culture. We can see some things in Abraham's life that we need to learn from. When we are going through things that are difficult and we are searching for a reason to do things, you have to have faith. Now, I'm not talking about just, magically thinking or magically dreaming that things are going to be okay. I'm talking about having a reason for doing what you're doing. When you get down to it, many things are based in faith. My belief in the theory of gravity is based in faith. I have seen it over and over and over, and so the evidence leads me to believe that anytime I drop something, it's going to fall. I've seen it happen many times, and so I have faith that gravity will continue to work. Now, when we're talking about living our lives in respect or in response to God's Word, our lives, like Abraham's life, need to be lived in faith. And now when you make mistakes and you fall short of what it is that God wants you to do, God didn't cut Abraham off at one mistake. God was very gracious and slow to anger and full of loving kindness for Abraham because God knew that people struggle. And Abraham did struggle. And so when you look through your life, if you find things that you're struggling with or that you're dealing with or maybe you're not dealing with well, it doesn't mean that you're a terrible person and that there's no way that you could ever have a good relationship with God, because Abraham had a pretty rocky start there as far as his faithfulness was concerned with God. But what happens is he grows in his faith. He overcomes his mistakes. He learns to be better. And he learns to trust that God will not lead him in the wrong direction. God will not tell him to do something and then not keep his word. And so from Abraham, we can see that sometimes when we fail, it doesn't mean it's the end. It means that now we have an obstacle to overcome. And as long as we're following God and walking with him, we can overcome them. And when we learn to trust in God, that he's doing everything for our good always, that his reasons for doing things are the best reasons for doing things, and we can have the kind of faith that Abraham had, and we can be pleasing to Abraham. Again, it doesn't mean you're perfect, but it means that because you trust that God is leading you in the right direction, that God wants you to do things that are good for you, and we're just going to do what it is that God wants. That's the kind of faith that Abraham had. It's the kind of faith that we need to have. And so we're going to be, try to learn these lessons as we go through history, see what these people did, and try to become more like the good things and less like the bad things. Thank you very much for watching this video. Maybe we'll have some questions that you guys can send me, and if I can, I'll try to respond back as soon as possible. Remember, you can text me, you can call me. Any kind of questions that you guys need to have answered, just let me know. What I'd like for you to do with the rest of the class that you have today, I know we didn't take up the whole period, and it's a longer period. What I'd like for you guys to do is to start discussing some of the things, maybe a project that you guys would like to do for this semester. Basically what we're going to have to do is, again, we're going to be replacing the research paper. I would like for you all to work together with the free time that you'll have in some of the classes, because the videos are not going to be over an hour long. But what I would like for you to do with the free time that you have in some of the classes is to choose a period in history and talk about maybe something that you could put together, like maybe a work of art. You could write like a period poem from a particular period in history, about the period and about the people, about the major figures. Maybe you could make some kind of a mural. Maybe you could write, I'd like to keep away from writing an essay, but maybe you can put together some kind of a story about what it would be to live like in a particular period in history, focusing on individuals now. We got the big story last time. Now we're focusing on the individuals. Just toss around some ideas, think of things that you'd like to do, and remember, it's going to have to be a group project. So it's going to have to be something that you can break down into different parts, and each person can do a little piece of it, and then you can put it together and create a larger project. If you're going to do something like a work of art or something like that, it might be something that maybe you could sell at the gala or just have to keep it to school. So just kind of kick around some ideas and see what you guys would be interested in doing. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday.